1.
Hi, this is Miss Goodale, and today I'm going to be talking about comparing and ordering rational numbers. I'm going to start out with just positives and negative whole numbers and then go on from there. So if you remember positive and negative numbers, if I do a number line, positive numbers increase going to the right on a number line. Negative numbers go in the opposite direction on a number line. So they would actually increase going to left, or they would actually decrease going to the left. So they go backwards from the direction that you would normally think of with positive numbers. So just kind of a quick run through. If I wanted to compare whole numbers, for instance, I want to compare -5 and 6. If I look at my number line, -5 is further to the left, so it would be smaller or less. And negative or positive 6 is to the right, and so it would be greater. And remember the signs. When I write this sign, it is open to the bigger number. I like to tell my students that it's like an alligator or just a mouth. It wants more food, so it's going to have the mouth open to the bigger number. Negatives are smaller than positive numbers. If I'm comparing a negative and a negative, so -2 and -7. Now normally if I were on the positive side of the number line, 7 would be bigger. But on the negative side, if you look, they go in the opposite direction. So it is actually the opposite of what you would normally think. So 7 is smaller than 2. Or if I want to name my 2 first, my 2 is larger than 7. So 2 is greater than 7. My mouth is open to the bigger number if I think of it that way. Okay, so with whole numbers, generally you just think about it going the other way on the negative side. And then we think about it the same way with fractions. And so I'm going to start with just general fractions. 1/4, 2/4 is equal to 1/2, so I'm going to write 1/2 instead of 2/4 here. Okay, and then I'm going to go the other way, -1/4, -1/2, -3/4. So I'm going to use comparison with these numbers. Drawing a number line can help you figure out where those numbers go as far as comparison. But in general, if you kind of think about it as if they were positive or negative, the negative numbers go the opposite direction as positive. So think about it that way. I'll show you a few examples on number line. So if I'm comparing -1/2 to -3/4, normally 3/4 is bigger if I were on this side of the number line. But since I'm comparing two negative numbers, it's actually the opposite. So 1/2 is greater. And if I'm comparing 1/4 to -1/4, my my positive number is greater. Okay. Let me give you another example. -1/4, -3/4, and my 1/4 would normally be smaller, but since we're on the negative side, it's the opposite, so -1/4 is greater. So now let's think about how I would do this if I didn't have a number line. So for instance, if I had, let's see, 2/3 negative and 1/3. Okay, so -2/3, -1/3. I'm going to use just kind of the raw form with the same denominator. If you get some that have different denominators, just remember that you have to compare with the same bottom number. Okay. Normally, if I had a number line, I know 2/3 is usually bigger than 1/3, but then when I go to the negative side, it's actually the opposite. So 1/3 is actually going to be bigger. Okay, so you might want to start with just thinking about, okay, what would it be if it were positive? I'm going to turn that around and make it the opposite direction because they go in the opposite direction when they are negative. Let's do some decimals. So I have -0.73, negative. Okay, so normally 73 hundredths would be bigger than 64 hundredths because I look at the number to the right, or to the right of the decimal place, the furthest left. But since they are negative, it's going to be the opposite. So instead of this one being biggest, 64 hundredths is bigger. Okay, so just think of it in terms of what it would normally be. When it's negative, it's backwards. Positive is going to stay the same, or it's going to be bigger if it's bigger. Negative is going to be opposite of what it would be if it were positive. I hope that makes sense to you. I'm going to leave it at that. Just remember, if you had a fraction like 1/5 compared to, let's see, 3/10, I would have to make those into equivalent, make the denominators the same. So 1/5, 5 times 2 is 10, 1 times 2 is 2, so that would be 2/10 as compared to 3/10. And I'm going to put negative signs in front of them. So normally 2/10 is smaller, but since I put a negative sign on them, the 2/10 would be larger. So 1/5 is less than 3/10. Okay, I'm going to put an equal sign because these both show the same thing. I just had to change them to equivalent fractions. Another thing you may run across is comparing and ordering a decimal that's negative and a fraction that's negative. Just know that you want to put those both in the same form. So if I had a negative decimal and a negative fraction, I would either make them both fractions or both decimals. Okay, I hope that helps you guys. I know this was kind of general, but let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.